The morning mistake that's silently destroying your teeth, and nobody is talking about it. I never imagined that something so automatic, so ordinary, so apparently correct, could be damaging me every single day without me even noticing. And what's most unsettling is that you might be doing the exact same thing right now, going through a morning routine that looks and feels healthy on the surface, but that is silently, consistently, day after day, compromising your teeth, your breath, and even your confidence every time you open your mouth to speak or smile. This isn't a dramatic claim. This isn't exaggeration. This is something that took me years to understand, and once I finally did, everything changed. Not just the way my mouth felt, but the way I carried myself through the world. The way I talked to people up close. The way I laughed freely in conversations. The way I felt stepping out of the bathroom in the morning, before the day had even properly begun. And it all starts with something as simple and as universal as waking up. What really happens inside your mouth while you sleep? Think about the last time you woke up. That dry feeling in your mouth. That strange, stale taste sitting on your tongue. That almost instinctive urge to rush to the bathroom and brush your teeth immediately, as if doing so would fix everything in one motion. Feels natural, right? Feels responsible. Feels like the right thing to do. But here's what almost nobody stops to think about. What is actually happening inside your mouth during those 6, 7, or 8 hours of sleep? What is the biological reality of that environment? And why does it matter so much for what you do the moment you wake up? Let's start with saliva. Most people think of saliva as just the fluid that makes it easier to chew and swallow food. But saliva is so much more than that. It is one of the most powerful natural defenses your body produces for your oral health. Saliva contains antimicrobial proteins, enzymes, and minerals that constantly work to neutralize acids, wash away food particles, remineralize enamel, and keep the bacterial population in your mouth in a healthy, controlled balance. When you sleep, your salivary glands dramatically reduce their output. This isn't a malfunction, it's a completely normal physiological process. But the consequences of that reduction are significant. Without that constant flow of saliva, the entire oral environment shifts. The pH drops. The moisture that ordinarily creates a hostile environment for harmful bacteria disappears. And in that warm, dry, still space inside your closed mouth, certain bacterial strains that were previously held in check begin to multiply with far less resistance. These are the bacteria responsible for the sulfur compounds that cause bad breath. These are the same microorganisms that, given enough time and the right conditions, can contribute to gum inflammation, plaque accumulation, and even the early stages of tooth decay. By the time you wake up in the morning, those bacteria have had hours to thrive, reproduce, and colonize the surfaces of your teeth, your gums, and especially your tongue. That unpleasant morning taste? That's not just morning mouth. That is the metabolic byproduct of billions of bacteria finishing their overnight work. And here's where the story gets complicated, because the problem isn't only what happens during the night. The problem is what most people do in response to it. The routine almost everyone gets wrong. For years, I followed what I thought was the right routine. Wake up, go straight to the bathroom, brush hard and fast, rinse, done. I figured I was taking care of myself. I figured that was what responsible oral hygiene looked like. But over time, I started noticing things that didn't add up. The sensitivity in certain teeth that seemed to get slightly worse year over year. The feeling of freshness after brushing that never quite lasted long enough, as if my mouth would revert back to that stale, uncomfortable state within just a couple of hours. And sometimes, despite brushing religiously every morning and every night, there was still that lingering worry. That subtle insecurity when talking to someone face to face, wondering if they could smell something I couldn't. That hesitation before leaning in to speak quietly to a colleague. That slight pulling back from closeness that I had never fully analyzed, but that was always there, quietly shaping how I engaged with the world. I didn't know it at the time, But those weren't random inconveniences. They were symptoms. Signals that something in my routine, something I had been doing automatically, confidently, and consistently, was fundamentally off. So I started researching. I started going deeper than the generic advice printed on the back of toothpaste boxes. I started paying attention to what dental science actually has to say about oral microbiomes, enamel chemistry, bacterial recolonization, and the specific sequence of habits that either protect or quietly undermine your oral health over time. What I found changed everything. The hidden cost of getting the order wrong. Let's talk about one of the most common morning habits that almost no one questions: eating or drinking before brushing. Millions of people wake up, head to the kitchen, make coffee, maybe eat a piece of fruit or drink a glass of orange juice, start their morning, and then, eventually, at some point before leaving the house, brush their teeth. This feels logical. It feels like you're brushing after breakfast, which sounds like the right move. But here's what's actually happening inside your mouth during that sequence. Coffee is acidic. Orange juice is highly acidic. Most fruits, especially citrus, are acidic. Even some of the seemingly innocent morning choices, like certain yogurts or whole grain cereals, lower the pH of the oral environment significantly. And when acid comes into contact with your tooth enamel, it doesn't damage it immediately and dramatically. It does something subtler and more insidious. It temporarily softens the enamel surface. Just slightly. Just enough. And that's the moment when brushing becomes a problem rather than a solution. When you brush your teeth while the enamel is in that softened, acid-weakened state, the mechanical friction of your toothbrush against the enamel surface, which under normal circumstances would be cleaning it, starts to become mildly abrasive. You're not just removing plaque and bacteria. You're creating microscopic wear on the very surface that is supposed to be protecting your teeth for the rest of your life. Do this once and there's no meaningful consequence. Do this every single morning for 10, 15, 20 years, and the cumulative damage starts to show up in ways that can't be reversed. Enamel doesn't grow back. Once it's worn away, it's gone. And as it thins, your teeth become more sensitive to temperature, more vulnerable to staining, more susceptible to cavities, and more likely to develop that dull, yellowish appearance that no whitening product can fully correct, because the issue isn't superficial staining, it's the depth of the enamel itself. Now think about how many mornings of your life have already followed this exact pattern. Not because you were being careless, but because nobody ever explained to you that the sequence mattered this much. The truth about tongue bacteria that nobody taught you. Here is another piece of the puzzle that most people spend their entire lives completely unaware of. When you brush your teeth in the morning, you're cleaning the surfaces of your teeth. You're removing plaque. You're disrupting bacterial colonies on the enamel and along the gum line. That part of the routine is genuinely important and genuinely effective, when done correctly. But here's the problem. Up to 90% of the bacteria responsible for chronic bad breath don't primarily live on your teeth. They live on your tongue. Specifically on the posterior third of the tongue, the back portion, closest to the throat, where most people never think to look and never think to clean. The tongue has a complex, textured surface covered in papillae, tiny structures that create an enormous amount of surface area. That surface area is a perfect environment for bacteria to colonize, embed themselves deeply, and resist being removed by simple rinsing or even aggressive mouthwash use. The bacteria there feed on proteins from food particles, from postnasal drip, from dead cells, and as they metabolize those proteins, they release volatile sulfur compounds that are the primary chemical cause of bad breath. When you brush your teeth without addressing your tongue, you are doing something equivalent to mopping the kitchen floor without dealing with the overflowing trash can in the corner. The floor looks clean, but the smell remains. And within a few hours, bacteria from the tongue recolonize the teeth and gums that you just cleaned. This is one of the core reasons why so many people brush diligently, use strong toothpastes, rinse with alcohol-based mouthwashes, and still find that their breath doesn't stay fresh, that their mouth doesn't feel truly clean, that there's always that subtle concern hovering in the background every time they get close to someone. The solution isn't brushing harder. It isn't switching to a more aggressive product. It's understanding that your tongue is a biological reservoir of bacteria that must be addressed as part of any genuinely effective oral hygiene routine, and addressed first, before anything else, as soon as you wake up. The silent accumulation. How small mistakes become big problems. This is perhaps the most important concept to internalize about oral health, and it applies to almost every aspect of how we take care of our bodies. None of this happens overnight. There is no single morning where you wake up and suddenly have bad breath because of one mistake. There is no single brushing session where you damage your enamel irreversibly. There is no single night of reduced saliva production that throws your oral microbiome into permanent chaos. What happens is far slower, far quieter, and far more difficult to trace back to its cause. Small errors repeated daily compound over time into outcomes that feel sudden and confusing when they finally become visible, but that have actually been building for years, hidden beneath the surface, working silently against you while you went about your life thinking everything was fine. Enamel erosion is a perfect example. You don't feel it happening. Your teeth don't send you a notification. There is no alarm. The process is so gradual that by the time you notice increased sensitivity, or your dentist tells you that your enamel has worn thin, you've already been doing the thing that caused it for years, and reversing the visible effects is no longer possible. You can stop the damage, but you cannot undo what's already been done. The same is true for gum health. Gum disease, even in its early stages, is remarkably asymptomatic. Mild gum inflammation, slightly receding gum lines, the early colonization of periodontal pockets with harmful bacteria. None of these feel dramatic when they're beginning. People don't rush to the dentist because of slight pinkness or occasional bleeding when brushing. They normalize it. They assume it's normal. They keep brushing the same way, in the same sequence, with the same blind spots, and the condition quietly progresses. And then there's the psychological dimension. The accumulation isn't only physical. The confidence cost that nobody talks about. Let's be honest about something that rarely gets discussed in oral health content because it feels personal and uncomfortable. The way oral health, or the lack of it, quietly affects how you show up in the world. Think about the last time you were in a conversation and felt a sudden, subtle anxiety about whether your breath was okay. Think about the last time you pulled back slightly from a hug or a close exchange because of that nagging uncertainty. Think about the times you've held back a laugh or covered your mouth when you smiled, not for any aesthetic reason, but because something at the back of your mind told you to be cautious, to be careful, to maintain a certain distance. Most people who experience this don't connect it to their oral hygiene routine. They think it's a personality thing, a confidence thing, a social anxiety thing. They work on their mindset, their communication skills, their self-esteem, and those are all genuinely worthwhile pursuits. But sometimes the root of that specific physical insecurity is much more literal and much more solvable than it appears. When your breath feels fresh consistently, not just for 20 minutes after brushing, but genuinely, durably fresh throughout the day, something shifts in how freely you engage with people. When your teeth feel strong and look healthy, you stop editing your smile. You stop calculating how far to lean in during conversations. You stop carrying that quiet background weight of wondering what the person in front of you is perceiving. This isn't about vanity. It's about presence. It's about being fully in the moments of your life without a fraction of your mental energy being diverted into managing an unnecessary insecurity. And the foundation of all of that is something as simple and as correctable as the sequence of habits you follow every single morning before you leave your house. What the right routine actually looks like. Now let's talk about what actually works, not based on marketing copy on a product label, but based on what the science of oral biology actually supports. Step 1. Before you do anything else, drink water. When you wake up, your mouth is dry, your saliva is minimal, and your bacterial population is at its overnight peak. Before you introduce anything else into that environment, before coffee, before food, before anything, drink a full glass of water. This serves multiple purposes simultaneously. It begins to rehydrate the oral tissues. It starts to rinse away the accumulated bacterial waste products on tooth surfaces and the tongue. It begins to restore a more neutral pH environment. And it kickstarts salivary gland activity, which is the beginning of your mouth's own natural defense response. This single habit, just drinking water upon waking, before anything else, creates a fundamentally different starting point for everything that follows. Step 2. Clean your tongue properly. Use a tongue scraper, not just a toothbrush. Tongue scrapers are specifically designed to remove the biofilm that sits on the tongue surface, and they are significantly more effective than brushing the tongue with a toothbrush. Start at the back of your tongue, as far back as you comfortably can, and pull the scraper forward in a single, firm motion. Rinse the scraper. Repeat 3 to 5 times, covering the full surface. This step alone, done consistently, can reduce bad breath compounds by an amount that most people genuinely cannot believe until they experience it themselves. The shift isn't subtle. When you start removing what's actually living on the back of your tongue, the difference in how your mouth feels and smells throughout the day is dramatic. Step 3. Brush, but with technique, not force. Hold your toothbrush at approximately a 45-degree angle to the gum line. Use gentle, circular, or short back-and-forth motions. Do not scrub. Aggressive brushing does not clean better, it just causes more damage. The gum line is where bacteria accumulate most dangerously, and that's where your brushing focus should be. Spend at least 2 minutes. Brush every surface. The outer sides, the inner sides facing your tongue, the chewing surfaces, and the backs of your rear molars, which most people miss almost entirely. Step 4. Don't rinse immediately after brushing. This one surprises people. Most toothpastes contain fluoride, which remineralizes enamel and creates a protective barrier on the tooth surface. When you rinse with water immediately after brushing, you wash away most of that fluoride before it has had adequate time to absorb into the enamel. Instead, spit out excess toothpaste, but don't rinse with water for at least 30 minutes. Yes, it feels strange at first, but the protective benefit of letting that fluoride contact your enamel uninterrupted is genuinely significant. Step 5. Time your eating and brushing correctly. If you eat breakfast before brushing, wait at least 30 to 60 minutes after consuming anything acidic before you brush. If you prefer to brush before eating, which actually has meaningful scientific support as a strategy, do so before consuming any food or drink, and then you can eat immediately afterward without the enamel softening concern. Either approach can work. What doesn't work is brushing immediately after acidic foods or drinks, which is exactly what millions of people do every single morning without understanding why it's quietly working against them. Step 6. Stay consistent with flossing, but do it at night. Flossing at night is more impactful than flossing in the morning for most people, because it removes the food particles and bacterial material from between teeth before the overnight period, before those hours when saliva production drops and bacteria have their best opportunity to thrive. If you're only flossing once a day, do it before bed. Make it the non-negotiable that morning brushing already is. Why products alone are never enough. One of the most persistent myths in oral health is that the right product will solve the problem. Switch to a stronger toothpaste. Use an alcohol-based mouthwash. Get the electric toothbrush with multiple settings and a built-in timer. Buy the charcoal powder. Try the oil-pulling protocol. Use the whitening strips. Some of these products have real benefits in specific contexts. But the reason so many people cycle through product after product without ever getting the consistently fresh, healthy, confident results they're looking for is not that they haven't found the right product yet. It's that no product can compensate for a fundamentally flawed sequence of habits. Mouthwash, for example, is commonly used as a primary defense against bad breath. And it does create a temporary effect. The strong flavor and antibacterial compounds reduce bacterial counts for a period of time. But if the bacterial reservoir on the tongue hasn't been addressed, and if the conditions that allow those bacteria to thrive are still in place, the bacterial population will simply re-establish itself within a few hours. The mouthwash masked the problem. It did not resolve it. Whitening products are another example. Tooth discoloration has multiple causes. Some of it is genuine surface staining that whitening treatments can meaningfully address. But if the yellowing or dullness is caused, even partially, by enamel thinning from repeated abrasive brushing or acid exposure, no whitening product will restore that appearance, because the issue isn't the color on the surface. It's the structural depth of the enamel itself. You can't whiten your way to thicker enamel. The point isn't that products are useless. The point is that understanding the actual mechanics of what's happening in your mouth, the biology, the chemistry, the bacterial ecology, is what allows you to make genuinely informed choices about which products to use, when to use them, and in what sequence, so that they work with your biology rather than simply creating a temporary illusion of cleanliness. The role of diet, hydration, and what you're overlooking. Your oral health doesn't begin and end in the bathroom. What you eat and drink throughout the day plays a role that most people fundamentally underestimate. Hydration is one of the most overlooked factors. Saliva, as we've established, is your mouth's primary natural defense. And saliva is water-based. When you're chronically mildly dehydrated, which most people in modern life perpetually are, your salivary production is reduced not just at night, but throughout the day. This means that the protective, antibacterial, remineralizing properties of saliva are operating below their potential for hours at a time, every single day. Simply drinking more water, consistently, throughout the day, not just first thing in the morning, creates a meaningfully healthier oral environment. It's not a replacement for brushing or any other hygiene practice, but it's a foundational support that makes every other practice more effective. Certain foods actively support oral health in ways that go beyond the obvious avoid sugar advice. Crunchy vegetables and fruits increase saliva production through the mechanical act of chewing. Dairy products provide calcium and phosphate that contribute to enamel remineralization. Green tea contains compounds that inhibit the growth of bacteria responsible for both bad breath and gum disease. Leafy greens are high in folic acid, which supports gum health specifically. And on the other side of the equation, it's not just sugar and acidic foods that cause problems. Frequent snacking, regardless of what you're eating, keeps the mouth in an almost constant state of acid exposure and bacterial activity, with insufficient recovery time for the oral environment to restabilize. Eating defined meals with periods of fasting between them gives your mouth, and your saliva, the opportunity to do the repair and defense work it's designed to do. The long game: what consistent habits actually produce. When all of these pieces come together, the correct sequence in the morning, the proper tongue cleaning, the timed brushing, the hydration, the dietary awareness, the nighttime flossing, something remarkable happens. Not immediately. Not in a week. But over weeks and months, the cumulative effect of consistently doing the right things in the right order begins to produce results that feel genuinely different from anything a single product or single intervention could create. The breath improves, not just in the morning, but durably, throughout the day. Because you've addressed the actual source, not just covered it over temporarily. The teeth feel stronger and look healthier, because you've stopped doing the things that were slowly eroding them, and your enamel has had the consistent support it needs to remineralize and protect itself. The gums stop bleeding when you brush, which for many people has been so consistent for so long that they'd simply accepted it as normal. It isn't normal. Healthy gums don't bleed during gentle, proper brushing. Bleeding is a sign of inflammation. And inflammation recedes when the bacterial environment is brought back into balance through consistent, correct habits. And then there's the confidence. The quiet, growing confidence that comes not from being told your smile looks good, but from actually feeling healthy inside. From not having to calculate the distance in conversations. From laughing without covering your mouth. From smiling freely in photographs. From being fully present with people, rather than spending a fraction of your attention managing an invisible anxiety about what they might be perceiving. The realization that changes everything. Looking back now, I understand something that took me too long to see clearly. The problem was never a lack of effort. I was brushing every day. I was using decent products. I was doing what I thought was right. The problem was a lack of understanding. A fundamental gap between what I was doing and what I should have been doing, and nobody had ever taken the time to explain the actual biology behind the habits. Nobody had ever connected the dots between the dry mouth in the morning and the bacteria on the tongue and the acid from the coffee and the timing of the brush and the fluoride being washed away too quickly and the enamel slowly thinning year after year. Because when you understand the why behind each step, the habits become easy to maintain. They stop feeling like arbitrary rules you're supposed to follow. They become logical, intuitive responses to a biological reality that you now actually understand. You don't need to brush harder. You don't need to spend more money on more products. You don't need an increasingly complicated routine that you'll eventually abandon because it's unsustainable. You need to understand what's happening. And then you need to do the right things, in the right order, consistently. That's it. That's the whole secret, and it's not actually a secret at all. It's just information that most people were never given, presented clearly, at a time when they could actually use it. What this means for you, starting tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning, when your alarm goes off and that familiar feeling of morning mouth greets you, you have a choice. You can do what you've always done, the automatic, unexamined routine that feels right but may have been quietly working against you for years. Or you can begin differently. Drink a full glass of water before you do anything else. Feel your mouth begin to rehydrate. Reach for your tongue scraper, or if you don't own one yet, add it to your list, because it will be one of the most impactful $3 investments you ever make in your daily wellness. Clean your tongue from back to front. Notice what comes off. Notice how different your mouth already feels. Then brush, gently, patiently, at the gum line, for a full 2 minutes. Spit, but don't rinse. And if you're going to have coffee or fruit, wait. Give your enamel the time it needs. These are not dramatic changes. They are not difficult. They don't require willpower or a major lifestyle overhaul. They just require understanding, which you now have. And if you've been struggling with persistent bad breath, with teeth that feel fragile or look dull, with gum sensitivity, or with that constant background anxiety about what your mouth is projecting to the people around you, know that those things are not inevitable. They are not just what getting older feels like. They are the results of specific, identifiable habits that can be changed. The health of your mouth is not a fixed reality. It is a daily practice. And like every daily practice, it can be done better, with more consciousness, more understanding, and ultimately, much better results. If this kind of science-backed, practical health content resonates with you and you want to keep discovering the things that nobody bothered to tell you, but that have the potential to genuinely change how you feel every single day, subscribe to the channel. Because in the videos ahead, I'll keep going deeper into the hidden mechanics of everyday health. The small things that quietly determine how energetic, confident, and physically well you feel as the years go by. The things that matter. The things that work. The things worth actually knowing. Because the real goal was never just cleaner teeth. It was the freedom to live, fully, closely, openly, without that invisible weight holding you back.